else very briefly,
Yes.
so we all know who's who and from where before we start?
Sensible thing.
Do you mean all students and then whoever is at Zoom?
Well, the students and the three of us and Hans,
Yeah,
just to
yeah,
make
no,
sure
no.
that we're okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Well, I absolutely. I plan to kind of introduce and
Okay.
how to watch, but definitely that would make actually better sense if we just go around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Lauren Betch, and I'm one of the executive directors at Ecolas.
Mhm.
And I'm Joe Decker. I'm also an executive director at A+ and professor of liberal arts and sciences education at Maastricht University.
And Samuel Abraham from Bisla, Slovakia, also on the board of Ecolas executive board.
I'm Hans Adriaanssens. I was a co-founder a long time ago of Ecolas, and now I'm doing nothing at all.
But we did name them after you, right? So
I'm Andrej Černý. I work for Ecolas as a sort of administrator, and I'm happy that our effort and the technical support was able to host you here today, and I'm very looking forward to hearing your news toward the world that we live in.
Alyosha?
And now we are on live.
Well, we should maybe we are at 4 o'clock, so maybe we could start.
We are online now.
Okay. So dear students, friends, colleagues, welcome to the Ecolas webinar, which is part of the project Europe's Youth, Its Hopes and Discontents, and also Hans Adriaanssen Student Award winning presentations. Larry Birch, Tune Decker, and I, the members of executive board of Ecolas, have been working for months on this project, and then we hope that it would continue somehow. We will still have to decide, even with your help, how we will continue. I want to thank you, Andrej Černý, for the communication and with you and the technical arrangement. I hope it will work because we are on Zoom, but also lots of people hopefully are watching it on our webpage, www.ecolas.eu. And also those who are watching us live can send the questions to a platform called Slido that you received. There are also colleagues and students watching from United States. It's a network of small liberal arts colleges that we are part of, and I want to welcome them, and hopefully our discussion will inspire them enough that there might be some kind of communication and also similar project in the United States. So hopefully you could have a next webinar with American students. Make sure all of you please come also tomorrow to support the other students who will be presenting. We read already the essays, and also tomorrow essays are excellent. So please come and join and support your fellow students. Okay, well, I'm so glad that Hans Adriaanssens agreed to come and say a few words. Actually, he will provide a welcome speech and greetings. In normal circumstances, I would give him a floor. I think giving him a screen would be too cheeky. Perhaps a word to Hans Adriaanssen. So please, Hans, thank you for coming and welcome the students that win the award in your name.
Well, thank you very much, Samuel. And let me first start by saying that I'm very grateful to the board of Ecolas, not only for having established an award program in my name, which is the type of honor that is normally given to people who have passed away some time ago, which I most obviously haven't. And I'd like to thank the board also for giving me the opportunity to say a few words to the award winners, to the students, whom I congratulate very much on being chosen by the board as award winners. Yesterday, And this morning, I had the chance to read all your papers and also the reports you wrote on how you engaged with peers and friends and what kind of discussions you engaged in. I must say I was impressed, and I'm still impressed, because together you touched on very many issues like democratization, authoritarianism. You talked about climate change, health problems, the threat of COVID and future pandemics. You wrote about inequality, racism, gender, prejudice, intolerance, propaganda, and disinformation. And most importantly, I think you wrote about so-called modern ways of twisting the truth and creating fake realities. Very exciting. You rightly emphasized the effects all these issues have on perspectives and challenges of young people. And many of you complained about how, particularly in this age of baby boomers like myself, how your intellectual potential has been neglected. Some wrote, and now I quote, that we, the youth, are butterflies with broken wings. You didn't stop at self-pity, though. Many of you put your cards and your hopes on education. But you also said immediately all this education and higher education in particular should then be much better organized than it has been for decades. And this is where ECOLAS comes in. ECOLAS was established to reinvent higher education, particularly in the bachelor's stage. From its very start, ECOLAS has tried to free our universities from the industrial, large-scale, and anonymous setup that became prominent in the second half of the 20th century. Since then, students and faculty have almost lost meaningful interaction, face-to-face contact. Teaching and learning were narrowed down to the transfer of mostly monodisciplinary knowledge. And what is most important, almost no attention was given to what always has been the basis of the production of our type of knowledge, and that is the community, the academic community. And of course, all this was aggravated, was made worse by the COVID pandemic. You know, I'm a sociologist, I'm not a priest. I don't believe in good intentions alone. Just praying for nice weather doesn't make the sun shine. If moral appeals are the only instrument we have for making this a better world, I'm sure it wouldn't help us much. What we do need is a social infrastructure that steers us in the right direction. And that is also true, maybe particularly true for higher education. Therefore, ECOLAS has been promoting 3 elementary principles of organization, of organizing our universities. I named them. The first principle is that we should focus within the university on the small-scale college idea, a college where students and teachers have the chance to get to know each other well, become persons instead of anonymous individuals. The second principle is that a converging liberal arts curriculum should replace a monodisciplinary program. This may help students to capitalize on their own developing interests and come to grips with complex reality. And the third principle is what I have called a culture of diversity. That's a culture in which students and faculty come from diverse national and international backgrounds that will force them to understand, and more importantly, to even appreciate a variety of viewpoints. Luckily, there are signs now that this development is getting momentum in many universities throughout Europe. But we certainly haven't reached what we wished for at the start of ECOLAS. I honestly hope that you will bring us closer to that goal. And considering the work that you have done, and considering the reports you've written and the papers you've written, and the discussions you're about to have, I'm very optimistic indeed. And for now, I wish you and the ECOLAS board a very productive webinar. Good luck.
Mhm.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Hans. We will clap in silence, as you can see. Thank you for your words. And one of the key element that has to be enhanced in European education is to give floor and a word to students. And this has been the project main aim, how you see the world, what you are worried about, and then how often you feel not heard enough by those who claim that you are the future. So let's proceed with the presentations. We will have a 3 presentation by Vico Genovese, Julia Jakubovic, and Fiona Pantago-Montotto, and then we will have a discussion. And please send us the questions to Slido, those who watch us on our webpage on YouTube. So please, Vico Genovese, the word is yours. Let's put it this way.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vico Genovese from Tor Vergata University in Rome, and I wanted to say thanks for granting me the possibility to be part of this conversation. During my report, so the meeting I had with fellow classmates, colleagues, and also neighbors, so people my age or even younger, I first of all thought that maybe the discussion would be about big themes, the big picture. So what I answered the question about was the international role of the EU in the future, which is a key issue to me. But what struck me, it was that I understood that the fear of a lot of people from my generation are more materialistic, are more near future related. And the discussion I enjoyed the most, because it was the one I didn't expect, regarding the job market for young people. So Alice, a friend of mine, a colleague, she told me that her main issue for the future was the fact that young people in Europe are not connected to the job market from the university. So she thought that the main issue that young people need to face, and sometimes they don't have the ability to do, is being connected and know how to handle themselves in a work environment. She mentioned the fact that she was for 1 year in Korea for an overseas, and she understood that in other countries, mainly Korea, because it was her background, she had a lot of connection with employees, which helped her a lot, not only in the career path, but also on knowing what she wanted and what she didn't want her job to be like. And another friend of mine also jumped in to comment on this, and he said that in the UK, where he lives now, he's an Italian guy who studied at Oxford University and now will started working in London. He said that during university, he had a lot of connections about job offers or job opportunities And so during his educational year, he had the chance to make up his mind on what to do, because I think it's a key issue that a lot of young people are improving educations, are getting to know a lot of different aspects of different fields, but we do not know sometimes how to handle this knowledge and how to find a career path that can be helpful for us and for the world. So we also, of course, mentioned that the EU has a lot of tools in general to support education for young people, the Erasmus being maybe the leading one. And I think it's fundamental for a career to know what it's like to study in another country during your most important years of education. And of course, the passing of the law of termination unpaid internship has been a progressing path upon this issue. But still, what I think it's also key, and me and another colleague thought about it, is that sometimes we look about it from the Italian perspective. And since a lot of you are not knowing the Italian perspective, it's quite depressing for young people approaching the job market. So I also wanted my guests not to make the mistake to understand that Europe is not just Italy, and a lot of opportunities are there for young people to emerge from education to from universities and to go in the job market, being an important actors upon it. And I thus wanted to my guests to know is my perspective that we have a lot of tools to improve our knowledge and to improve in our careers that can grant us better opportunities in the future. But still, and I will conclude by saying this, what struck me the most is that it seems to me from the people I interviewed, the more you get closer to the job market and the more you know what it actually is, the less optimistic you are. And therefore, this approach is, of course, depressing for a person like me who's still studying, but it's something that we need as a European Union, but also as my generation, to think about when we deal with this issue. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Vico. A perfect 5 minutes. That was great. And your main theme about university and the job market would be great to have some comments, but also suggestion in the discussion. So think about those. Please, Julia Yacukovic.
Hi, my name is Julia, and I'm a third-year student at University College Groningen in the Netherlands. I'm Polish, and I currently live in Poland, and this is where I had a conversation with other young people in my local community. And I'd like to talk about the main issues that were raised and the role of my generation in addressing these issues. And the main future concern seems to be climate change and all the related problems of overconsumption and some issues related to capitalism, and also military conflicts affecting Europe, for example, through migration. Well, these are big structural issues, and there are bigger actors involved. There are political parties, there are states, corporations, European and international institutions. And these problems require structural solutions. And here, the biggest role we could have is to support or just simply vote for parties or candidates that have concrete programs for addressing these challenges. So there is this big societal level where a role could be limited, but there is also a local level. And I think this is where the qualities of young people really show. So you could say that rebellion is the quality of the young, and young people have many beautiful characteristics, such as being uncompromising or spontaneous or motivated to self-organize on a local level in small-scale collective movements. So among my peers, the dominant view was that those grassroots movements are the most meaningful way of voicing our opinions as young people, or as or of making impact on communities or indirectly on society. However, not everyone is on the same boat. And when we were considering the question of what is the potential of our generation, we were actually questioning of well, who do we have in mind? People of my age, just like people of any age really, have very diverse political views and very diverse personal circumstances. And first of all, it is, well, some kind of a luxury to see climate change as your primary concern, because, well, many people have much more pressing issues in their daily lives to become activists or to even have an informed opinion. And second of all, many young people disagree on these issues. I disagree on with many people on how climate change should be addressed or what kind of solutions should be implemented in relation to migration. So in light of this diversity, we think it could be more useful to talk about the potential of specific individuals or groups, and always in relation to some concrete political aims. So when I said that the biggest impact would be to support, well, candidates or political parties with plans or programs for addressing climate change or migration, well, there are people working on these programs, and this is where young people could be involved. So I think the most meaningful way of maximizing or utilizing the potential of young people would be to make connections between bigger organizations or parties or people involved on a societal level, and the local movements or activists working in their small communities. And this was, I think, the main theme in my interviews, in my conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Julia. I want to ask you, did you do any interviews in Poland?
Yeah.
Oh, you did in Poland. Okay. Well, the theme is the grassroots movement. That's a big thing, but even bigger is the climate change. And you mentioned that you had some disagreements. So hopefully in the discussion, you will tell us what kind of disagreements, because the climate change was on the lip or on the pen, written in almost every student. So I'm sure people will jump in and have a disagreement or agreement with you. All right. Okay. Fiona Pantoga Montoto from New York, but otherwise from Bard College or in Berlin. So we want to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but been living in Berlin, Germany, because I go to Bard College Berlin. So yeah, I mean, initially my own thoughts when I thought about the questions in the survey were reflecting on our modern day technology-centered connection and access to information, as well as people's desires or lack thereof to investigate areas of discussion before drawing conclusions, like drawing conclusions purely based on headlines and what the media reports. And also in my discussion with my peers, some of them shared these concerns as well, specifically concerning overreach of the government and companies and the erosion of individual rights and privacy. But the majority of our conversation actually ended up taking a slightly different route. It happened to include several young people who are not originally from Europe, but are living here abroad. And I think many of us can identify with living in a country that we're not originally from, especially being students. In 2012, 20.5 million people living in the European Union were third country nationals. So it's not surprising that this was one of the most prominent points in our discussion. So yeah, well, our conversation started out with a discussion about the media misconstruing situations of conflict for the sake of capitalizing off of the story. We digressed to what it is like trying to find jobs and opportunities in Europe as someone visibly not from Europe originally, and how people felt exploited based on their passport. Yeah, my peers commented that with a non-European passport, they felt that it was difficult finding and holding positions compared to native-born Europeans who may perhaps have the same qualifications or fewer. One student commented that she felt that maybe a Danish person looking for a job in Germany who spoke no German would still stand a better chance than her who she has B2 level German. And they made an interesting observation that many places of work or internships know that some of them are far away from home and don't have many options. So they can do things like underpay them or take advantage in other ways. Initially, the responses of how we could address this issue were a bit pessimistic. I think some people commented, just overqualify yourself, learn and read every relevant regulation so you yourself can't be exploited or find yourself in a bad situation, or simply hope it doesn't happen to you or future generations like your children, so that you don't prevent yourself from opportunities simply because you fear being exploited. Someone did comment that they were afraid that their children have to go through the same thing they do, and they didn't want that to happen. But in the end, I think some of the more uplifting thoughts we left with were quite similar to the ways I consider to be solutions for the topic of censorship and misinformation and the freedom of speech, which is what I wrote about, which is face-to-face conversation. I think that face-to-face conversations do a lot that no other method can, like seeing the emotions and expressions on someone's face triggers the human instincts that people can't ignore. And I think we forget that there are actual humans on the other side of every interaction. Yeah, that's what I was left with.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Fiona. Well, maybe we could start with you because all three of you provided kind of rather bleak picture, and that's understandable. But were there any hopes, any positive prospect that you sense in the conversation, or you had to prod it, or you had to ask for it and you didn't get any? Because that's also an important part of the discussion.
If I can just jump in, I mean, in our conversation, we talked about a lot of things. We also talked about like grassroots movements and protesting and having like, you know, playing a role in the solution. And I think that some of my peers commented that they weren't sure whether it's our responsibility to solve these issues. I mean, they expressed that they would like to play a role, but they also were just, I guess, posing the question, like, is it up to us? Is it our burden to take on, even though we all want to?
Okay, well, please, anyone with comments and questions, suggestions.
I think my peers shared very similar opinions to Fiona's, that individuals have very limited capacity to address the structural challenges, especially when we're talking climate change, but that applies to job markets, to any of the big challenges we're talking about here. And also, yeah, is it our responsibility, like Hannah said? Whenever I try to ask about hopes or some optimism, the conversation somehow drifted off to how challenging it is and how many complexities are involved in bigger challenges, and how it's not possible to overcome these complexities on an individual level. So there was very little optimism in my discussion.
Any optimism anywhere?
Well, if I can jump in, I wanted to comment on Julia one, because we talked a lot about climate change too during my meeting, and we had several optimistic views, mainly the one being that there's a lot more awareness right now than it was before. There's a lot more education about it, and there's a lot more social movement behind it. So I had some peers that were uploading the Fridays for Future movements, for examples, or a lot of startups. I don't even recall all the names, but that were in these aspects making a lot of improvements from the before situation, from the situation that was before. I was not part of the optimistic part, so I will not jump in with my opinion, because I understood that we're looking for optimism right now. But I do have to say that I think that right now our generation, even though the situation is not as good as it could be, our generation is more willing than ever to make a change. So that is something that we can start from.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe any of you and those who are watching us live stream, the Fiona raised a very important question, and I think Julia seconded that, whether you feel whether you have a right to be responsible, or whether it's your duty at this point to do something, but subconsciously is there that perhaps you feel that you don't have a opportunity to do that. But anyone to comment on this, whether you feel that it's your responsibility to do something, however small, not to do the Greta step, which might be of great interest to many, but sometimes small work is more important. Small step around you is more important than to throw a big news. Any comments on this? How you feel responsible, and how you feel having an opportunity to do something responsible?
I can chime in. There were two notions that kind of separated in my group discussion, and the first one was that there's been a lot of challenges that have been handed to our generation, and a lot of problems that we face. But at the same time, there have been a lot of tools and abilities handed to us, and there was a gratefulness, I would say, for the education that we're able to attend, and for the resources that we still have. And with that came the urge to participate in shaping and in developing new solutions and other ways of coming together. So there was hopefulness and optimism. And there was the notion or the understanding that our generation should and can take responsibility to an extent, and should take its own active role in shaping our world, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Well, anyone else would like to comment?
And they do.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting, but as far as climate change is concerned, yesterday, the Dutch court ruled that Shell company, was forced by the courts to do much more in the situation of climate and climate change. And that was a major ruling, contrary to what has happened over the last decade. And it's done so because of all the activism on the part of younger people. There was the second time in, 2 years or so in Holland, that a major ruling by the court was in favor of activist groups and against Shell company and other polluters in our country. So there is reason for at least some optimism. It came a bit late, that's true, but changes are going on right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Fiona, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about, that grassroots movements and activism does have an added benefit of like raising awareness and just letting people know what's happening. And people were a little bit hesitant though about like how potent those movements can be, because we noticed that sometimes they die off after a few months and they still live, but they're not as powerful. So we did discuss, like someone mentioned that they had a friend that's doing like archival work for countries are like to preserve history and to preserve like information. So I think that there are very practical solutions that we just don't really think about. I think the immediate thought is like to go to a protest or to be an activist or to post on social media. But I think that there are actually really practical ways that we can really contribute.
Is there any grassroots movement that you encountered during your discussions or you know of that kind of surprised you? How it actually survived those few months that Fiona mentioned, that how they managed? Did you encounter in your discussions or in your surroundings something that positively surprised you? Anyone?
I would maybe just go ahead. I would maybe just jump in that to what Mr. Adriaansens mentioned about the court ruling in the Netherlands, and I'm very optimistic about it. And also among my peers, I encountered like Western Europe is finally dealing with climate change. But for example, in my country, in Slovakia, our government, they didn't acknowledge that climate change exists still. So there is like this feeling of, I would even say like generational superiority over the older generation, because they are just, well, there is this feeling that they were clueless. They are just not doing anything.
Well, just in a slight defense of the current Minister of Environment, Jan Budaj, who is actually quite an activist, but he might be a lonely wolf in the whole.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So any other grassroots activity that you encountered that gives you hope?
Sammy, let me ask a question in this regard. I know that that all of you are involved in co-curricular activities as well as your academic activities, and it seemed to me I spent a lot of time on the accreditation teams for all the Dutch colleges, and I was really impressed with the kinds of activities that students engaged in that that many times had to do with these very issues. So there was a lot of participation in community projects, refugee projects, climate change projects, and that sort of thing. And I thought to myself at the time, I thought, well, this is kind of a grassroots movement that doesn't have any connection necessarily, but it's a terrific experience for students. And thinking about the liberal arts in general is just the kind of co-curricular activity that one would hope that a liberal arts student who is has at least some kind of moral content to their education would be engaged with. So I'm sure all of you, or many of you at least, are engaged in these co-curricular activities, and I take great hope in that kind of activity. And I think that when you see what happens when you are involved in those kinds of things, generally it carries over, right? Generally, you want to be a good citizen after that, even when you're out of school. So I was quite optimistic about that sort of thing, and I hope you would think about that a little bit and how much you really are contributing when you engage in those kinds of activities.
Sure.
Well, now there was a year that you couldn't do much extracurricular activities, but now is the chance for you to activate, organize small things. We at BISLA do that, and it's not going fast, but slowly moves. There is a question. Actually, it's for Orviko, but actually it's a question for all of you, and for all of us. It's in the chat room. You mentioned the gap between education and the labor market. What can university do to overcome this gap? What are the university not teaching? And this is, well, you are mostly a liberal arts students, but still you know from your fellow students who are at the large universities, or for your institution, what are the university not teaching in order to prepare you for the good job, or as Derek Bock says, for the third job, because that's
Sure.
the job market for the liberal arts graduates.
Well, it was directed to me, so I wanted to comment. I do not think that the question should be posed that what are university not teaching, because I do not think it's a question of teaching. I think it's a question of connection and a question of giving the information of what are the opportunities for students. Because I do think that getting into the job market, I understood this thanks to my internship, we will not be prepared for job just for one course that we did at university. So we will need to understand what is to work in a working environment, what will be our job, day-to-day activities. We cannot be prepared for that before entering in the job market. But what we can do, what universities can do, is offer students the possibility to engage in a lot of different activities, the possibility to get to know employees and what they look for. They can grant us a webinar, for example, but in general, examples of what our futures could be like. My university, I admire the work of my university and my course especially for the fact that a lot of times they invite people over not to talk about not to convince us about getting into their job, starting in their field and then go to work for them, but telling us what is their day-to-day life, what they do on each daily basis, and understand if we actually like that or we don't, because we don't have an idea about it. I think that is one of the most crucial parts of the gap that I outlined and my peers outlined. It's not what we don't know, because we can not be prepared about it. We can learn after that. There's no problem in doing that. But what it's impossible for us is wasting time in careers we don't even know what they're like. So that is the key issue I wanted to outline, and I hope I was clear right now more than before.
Anyone? Yes,
yeah.
Julia?
Yeah. So I have a slightly different opinion about that. And I think it's partly about teaching, because in our LAS education, we take many courses. Some of them are foundational courses, like I major in psychology. So for example, developmental psychology would be one foundation course. And then we learn a lot of theories, and it's very abstract and academic, and that's a good thing, because that's what the course is about. But also there could be some small addition at the end of each course, maybe a discussion or something about how people in this specific field work in the future. So what kind of research questions they tackle. And I don't mean just research questions that we read about when we take the course, but maybe the professor himself or herself could share what kind of research she is working on and how the experiments look like, how is she going about it, or how are people working in like not in academia but in the real world within this specific field. And this could apply to many courses. Or there could be one session when someone from the outside comes in and talks about their job and how it looks like. So I think it's partly about teaching, and it's about connecting the academic content to the job market, to some knowledge about job market and possibilities out there.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Please, Veronica, you wanted to say, please.
Yeah. In my conversation, I had more hopes than concerns, and we had a conversation about job market and students as well. And this point will be about young people taking responsibility for issues that we actually can relate now. In Ukraine, university students organize a startup, which the idea of to connect students and companies or businesses who are looking for employee. And this startup cooperates with universities. So on a university basis, they can do workshops. They can also spread the information about vacancies and job opportunities, career opportunities for students, exactly for students. So this is like a small step towards the solution of this issue. And it's really hopeful and inspirational, because young people, the university students, they actually took responsibility for that. and it's just inspiring.
Okay. Anyone else about what should and should not university do, or what should do? What do you feel?
Yeah, I agree with Julia and what she mentioned and connecting it to practical work, but even more than that, to do the next step and not only connect it to academic workforces or workplaces, but also to generally the work environment that exists. So I think that's something that Freiburg does pretty well, to give an idea of what researchers work in that field and what academic route exists, but another or different companies or different ways in which employers need employees actually could be discussed and could be shown in those areas as well, to give a broader overview.
Yeah, well, I sense like your slight frustration, but it's a natural frustration. It's very difficult to connect academic and practical element, and yet that's part of the liberal arts, and it's not easy even there because it's such a difficult thing, and that's why the conversation must be on that interconnection, and evidently even liberal arts has uphill battle with these issues, but that's natural. But the worst part is if it's just academic environment where there are just lectures and then exams without really even coming close to each other, and not talking about the practical issues. Anyone else? The last comment, please.
I have one. I mean, I know that Bard College Berlin has a really cool internship course that I think is actually quite helpful in this. I know several alumni who ended up working with the organization that they took internships with, or ended up pursuing like masters in the fields that they interned with. So I think that like these sort of things are like clearly really beneficial in this way.
Well, send us the syllabi of it, and we can distribute it. Maybe we can hire some students who would go and talk to their deans to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that. Okay. Well, it's almost quarter to 5. There should be a break, but I'm not sure whether we need a break if someone wants to go away, and because I don't want to lose you. This is the problem, that we cannot lock the door. So if you want to leave for short, you will, and let's just hand me the floor to our screen or word to Tune Decker, and then let's just go to the next three presentations.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel, and thank you to everybody who's spoken so far. A lot of themes that were raised in the previous presentations: climate change, the role of technology, the precarious position of many young people, I think also came through very nicely in the second group of essays. First, I'd like to hand over to Alyosha.
Yeah, thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Should I go ahead?
Please.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Alyosha. I'm studying LIS in the first year in Freiburg and psychology in my second year. And originally, my answers in the essay questions were about democracy and the current development and changes that happen to democratic systems all over the world. In our group discussion, though, I decided to leave the structure more open, and there were quickly a few main questions that arised. Basically, what worries us, but also what is it that moves us and that connects us. So during the conversations that I had with my local community and my local LIS community, 3 main themes emerged out of those questions. They were democracy, identity, and communication. And the more we talked and the longer we dissected those topics, the more it boiled down to just one single aspect of what we were talking about, and that was communication. So we asked ourselves, how do we communicate? How do we manage to move along together into the future instead of being divided? How do we bridge differences that have been nourished on social media and in political discourse over decades, basically? It became clear to us that the challenges that we face will not be solved in solitude. Those challenges will demand cooperation and coordination on a scale that we probably have never experienced before. And to establish the foundation for something that we call to hope we or us as a generation, we need to communicate our values and what is important to us and what we imagine our common future to be. We then talked about that we need to find ways to communicate these values and perspectives that will enable us to create a synthesis out of the differences that we perceived early in our communication or in our dialogue about the issues, and that we saw as crucial to finding a common future, basically. We saw that we face a lot of uncertainties, and we find established systems at times unfit to provide frameworks for the global or international solutions that we would wish to implement. Climate change, for example, the erosion of democracy, and loss of shared identity were all issues we believe that are bigger than nation states and therefore can't be solved on national levels. Communicating our needs, therefore, comes with the responsibility to provide solutions as well. At least that's how our group saw it. Solutions that by themselves, as we see, will not solve those challenges we face. Implementing these solutions will help us to solve these challenges. And for that to happen, the power and authority that is needed to implement these solutions needs to be distributed accordingly. Policy for one generation, as we already talked about earlier, or calculated vision will not be overcome if we don't do that. For that, trust and accountability are crucial to us. Aspects that also need to be established through communication in our view. And the influence that we as a generation hold is too small right now, but we also didn't stop there and say, and because we said it would be unfair to say, oh, we're just not being listened to, and everyone is ignoring us. We see that it will take time, patience, and perseverance for us to shape our communities. And we also think that it will be inevitable that failure is a part of our learning process. Learning from mistakes that we make and teaching others of the experiences we had is all the more reason to keep listening to one another, to keep learning from one another. But as I already said earlier in the first discussion, we are hopeful. Youth movements around the world, the interconnectedness that we share as digital natives, and also the growing consciousness around the challenges we face are fueling the spirits that we had and our creativity to come together and to create solutions for a future that will be more connected and not less. We believe that our perceived differences can be set aside, or at least we hope so. Finding a shared vision that brings us together and helps us in solving these challenges ahead will, in our view, be the first task that our generation has to accomplish. And we're sure that many more issues and challenges will come after that. To close, I want to say something that I already mentioned also early in the discussion, and that's the spirit that prevailed in the larger discussion that I had over Zoom with LIS students and non-students. Basically, hopefulness, confidence, and love were the spirits that prevailed. Love for a world that we're lucky enough to live in and that we're entrusted to take care of in the coming decades, and that we will be able to shape. The challenges that our generation will face will be no small feat. But our conclusion in our discussions and dialogues was that we do not fear facing them because we'll do it together. I'm very much looking forward to debating those issues with you and finding solutions to the challenges that we see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really interesting stuff. I noticed in your essay that you thought that this generation was often perceived as a generation of quitters. Who thinks that? What's the argument there?
That was what we perceived in our education, mainly not our secondary education, but leading up to that. And there was often a notion of, oh, if you don't perceive the instrument that you learned, or if you don't go after the instrument that you learned, or if you don't continue in those other aspects that you have been good as a child or something like that, you're quitting. And we never saw that as quitting. We saw that as moving onto new and different and interesting topics that we loved and that were crucial to us and to our understanding of the world.
And do you feel that that's often not understood, that idea of people sort of reinventing themselves all the time?
Well, that's what we see when we see adults and when we look to generations above us. But it was a shared notion among many of us that we felt that there was judgment in switching career paths, in switching education, in switching the things that interest us and that we go after. Yeah.
Okay. And did people think weird old people? What do they understand, or were they actually a little bit insecure about their own choices?
I think we never claimed or saw that people were like always set on a certain path. I think there was always change in what people went after. But yeah, it was interesting because I didn't think it would be a topic that would come up in all discussions, but it came up basically with everyone. So yeah.
Okay, well, let's park that in some place. Let's take a pin in it, and maybe we can come back to it. But before we do that, Veronica.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Veronica. I'm originally from Ukraine, but I'm a student at LCC International University in Lithuania. And it was an honor for me to participate in the research and discover more about my generation and myself. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'm also honored to make 4 voices of the participant of my research and conversation to be heard. And these people are not connected to each other in any way. Moreover, they are coming from completely different corners of the world. And at some point of my life, I was lucky enough to meet each of them. And they're not all from EU countries, and some of them not even from geographical Europe. And this gives an unexpectedly broad view on the topic we discuss. And we may live in different countries, but we are all the generation of the future, and we have to work on it together. And moreover, we want to work on it together. So I will discuss opinions and concerns of a university student from a small city in Ukraine, a recent graduate from the country of Georgia living in Berlin, a senior student from Spain, and a young journalist from South Korea. And this is really interesting because according to the place where you grew up and who is surrounding you, your concerns about your future are super different. And one of the most common is, of course, environmental issues, and that we are expected to deal with the previous generation's problems in our future. And the young people are already worried about the possibility of entering a job market after graduation and the issue of discrimination and inequality. But the most inspiring thing is all people with whom I had a conversation, they all said that we will go through it all together as a global generation. So everyone was feeling the connection with the people, with the youth all over the world. And youth years are always challenging. So during this time, people tend to explore themselves and the world around. And this is a period when we're setting our goals and creating relationships with other people and trying to find our place in life. And each young person with whom I had a conversation is unique, with a different perspective, mindset, worldview, and dreams. And there is one main thing that unites all of them is a hope for a better future, a hope for a better future where we're working on it all together, trying to solve all the concerns we have. I strongly believe that we can cause a change as a youth and that we can achieve all our goals and our ideas and opinions matter. So we as a young people are concerned about many different issues, but we are all united, and we are the first global generation under constant connection with each other, and we have friends from different countries or even continents, and we are able to see and hear issues happening in different parts of the world, and we can raise the awareness about this issue in our small local community. We are able to discuss it openly, and we are able to reach many sources of information, as well as criticize and think critically. And in contrast for previous generations, we are multicultural, we are linked together, and we have so much to offer to a present era. But unfortunately, a lot of people from my generation feel that we are heavily overlooked. But anyways, the conversation was full of hopes rather than concerns. And the trust is in long-term potential of the education and knowledge as a tool for transformation. And to do so, we must uphold our philosophy of comparison, social justice, and reverence as one global generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Veronica. Very interesting stuff. Many themes picking up very nicely from Alyosha. You mentioned that a lot of people felt that they were overlooked, right? How did that manifest itself? How do you know? What makes you feel overlooked?
In particular, my conversation with participants, it was more about internship and job markets, especially for people who are in the senior year or who graduate in the university. We have more, like as we feel, as a generation, we have more skills and knowledge than, for example, people who had graduated decades ago. So I cannot say about everyone, but the majority are already ready for a job because of additional courses called curriculum and online working. And people who are like employees, they're still not trusting enough to the generation to give a job or internship easily. So that's why, like, the main concern is the main way why we feel overlooked was in the conversation.
Hey, that's interesting. So it really has to do with sort of established generations not really seeing all the ways in which young people are learning. And it's not only about a degree, but it's also about the extracurriculars, and it's also about the connections elsewhere. And that somehow isn't taken into account. Do I have that right?
Yeah, exactly.
How very stupid. Gotta do something about that. Christoph, you're next.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I'm very grateful to be here. I'm Christoph. I'm a third-year student at BISLA in Bratislava in Slovakia. And I wanted to maybe present a slightly different findings than other colleagues, because the interviews I have conducted among my peers, they were mostly pessimistic. I had one university student among them, one high school student, and two working young people. And during the interviews, we came across this main topic, which I would label as the problem of social media, or a cult of personality that is being created on social media, which is, let's say, now there is this conflict in Israel with Palestine, or vice versa, depends on your overview. And these real world problems or conflicts are being essentially transmitted to the so-called constructed reality of social media. And these social media are affecting us by a way that, let's say you are some great influencer, a sportsman, or an actor, and your voice just essentially counts more because you are being heard more. And therefore there is this pessimism, like quote unquote ordinary people like us, we have no power to influence anything. At least that's what I found among my peers, that feeling. Unless you are some important person on social media, which, let's say, there is, I don't know, for example, Rihanna, who calls out that yes, there are being crimes, war crimes being committed in Gaza, and this is the same thing with like ideas that would move our society forward, because once you don't have the means to put them forward or just let yourself be known, you just can't convey those ideas unless you are quote unquote someone. And during the interviews, I have also found this feeling that also social media, they're affecting our generation in like behavioral patterns. Let's say that you are unconsciously just carrying your phone with you to the toilet. So it's penetrating into like most basic patterns of our behavior. And my peers, they were pessimistic, like you carry this device with you all the time, but most of the people, they are not able to use it properly, and therefore this whole phenomenon of hoaxes, disinformation is being spread exponentially. And also these challenges that we are presented with, people are, or at least among my peers, there was this consensus, like we are not really solving them in reality, but we are upvoting and downvoting, like we are just promoting something which is labeled as righteous on social media, and we then get some satisfaction that, oh yes, we are good people because we are sharing it, but nothing is being done in reality. But let's just not be pessimistic. There was also optimism, mainly about new types of education, because at least in my country, there is like the school system is almost ancient. It cannot be even compared with like Western Europe, maybe just some universities, but primary school and high school, there is also this mismatch between labor market and schooling, unless you are like a technician or you are working manually, let's say. So yeah, that would be it from me. I'm glad for any possible questions and open for debate. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much, Christoph. That's really fascinating, because what you're saying there touches on a sort of contradiction in a lot of your essays about communication. Because on the one hand, many have argued, and so Alyoshka, you've made that argument, that communication really is the key. And that it is, right, more communication and more communication amongst this generation is the answer. Whereas, Christoph, you seem to be thinking that actually communication perhaps is the problem. And that the social media, which promised at least to give everybody a voice and to enable much more communication, actually got hijacked by existing power structures and are using, many of our worst instincts against us. So just as go.
Thank you. I would probably say that, yes, it enabled us to communicate more, but in a simplified and also like a stupefied manner, that we are not having real conversations. We are essentially playing a ping pong, like you say one phrase and I say the other, and we are like affirming each other, and no solution is being reached.
Alyosha, well, you disagree. Talk to each other, you two.
No, I completely see the problem too, and that social media especially can help communication become toxic and become divided and not bridge differences. And I believe that that's a huge issue, and that's exactly the issue that I am making my point for, that we have to solve it. Because communication doesn't mean that we have to further dialogue like we have it right now, but that we need to find new ways to communicate and to establish connection, and to break out of those conversations that have been developing over years now, where you have two sides or two parties, and they just argue against each other and they affirm themselves, and there's no approach in trying to find common solution or to find common ground. And changing that and finding ways to come to a newer form or better form of communication that still involves many people, I think is a great challenge that I don't have an answer to, but I believe that it can be helpful.
But what then? It's a general question. What is then the difference between the good communication and the bad communication?
Well, I think it's hard to draw the line. You can measure it by outcome, if you will, or by the way that people feel towards each other afterwards. And for my personal life, I can say that I experience communication that in the end I see as hurtful and as dividing. And after that, I often receive dialogue again, and I find to have communications or have talks with people that are healing, that are connecting, and to come back together if we want to face challenges in the future as a community, as a collective, and together, then somehow bridging this division and somehow healing the pain that has been inflicted is, for me, one of the places to start.
Okay. Christoph, you want to respond to that? Healing communication possible?
I think it's a great idea, but in a polarized world like this one is becoming, you cannot have a good conversation because one side is already having their facts, which are being gathered on social media, and the other one as well. So there is no common ground usually, which is sad, of course.
I completely agree that's an issue. And I've lived in the US for a year and met many people that were on the opposite political side or on the opposite side of many issues that we could not at all agree on, but we could still start to talk and to communicate over different issues and different things that were important to us. And then when a relationship was established, there was a different way of talking about these issues. And it was not about hurting the other person or being like rah-rah and right, but it was about trying to foster understanding, and from that to maybe change the perspective slightly, to not turn someone around. And I think that's impossible to achieve within like a few conversations or on social media, but to at least find some kind of common ground and to start from there, and to start to understand the worldview that the other person holds. And maybe that's a bit too hopeful or a bit too optimistic, but I had experiences where that worked for me, and those were just awesome. So I hope to have more of them.
Veronica, you care to comment? Because of course you spoke to people from all over, right?
Yeah.
What was the common thing? What was the thing? And it's a larger question, right? What is the we of this generation? What is the thing that creates the sense of community amongst people in so many different places?
Mm-hmm. In my case, it was that everyone was connected through social media, and we have a lot of different issues going on right now in different countries, and it's violent conflict or racism, etc. And everyone from my generation is aware of it, and you can share and spread the information of what's going on, for example, in States, in Ukraine, by using your social media account. And you can discuss these topics with your friends, and this feeling that you know what's happening with other people kind of gives this connection and this, I don't know, the meaning of the global generation. So maybe the main point is that we are connected through internet, through information and social medias.
And that's the two sides there.
I have a different opinion here.
Oh, great. Julia, come in with a different opinion.
Yeah, because some of you mentioned that there is a shared we, or that young people can unite, or that young people are united. But I simply don't see the we, because I think that among young people, there are people with many different political views and many different identities. And I don't think that just because I'm young and the other person is young, that we have a shared value system or that we have shared beliefs. And I think it's impossible to ignore that there are different political agendas out there. And this is one obstacle to communication. And I think social media is another. I don't think we're all connected just because we are on social media, because we are connected to specific individuals. We're connected to our friends, and we are connected to people who we chose to follow or who we simply follow, whether it's your choice or not. And then we are constantly exposed to the same opinions, actually, which exacerbates polarization. And in my discussion, social media and social media activism was a big theme. And we were frankly quite pessimistic because it seems like it's mostly words and not action. And that's first of all. And second of all, it's convincing the people who are already convinced of something. So I can follow climate activists, for example, or I can follow people who care about all sorts of different issues, job market or labor rights or whatever. But then I'm constantly exposed to the same arguments and I'm already convinced. So how effective is online activism? I think that if a person of an opposing view, well, the person of an opposing view would probably not encounter these people online. And if they did, they would probably have a strong cognitive dissonance and they would just get really frustrated and not engage with this argument. So I don't think that social media is a platform for connection or discussion, really. So I think that's rather a problem than a solution.
I have something to add as well, if I may.
Jump in.
Because I actually wrote my own personal response to the survey was about this, like, kind of my concern that people do end up sharing, like wanting to do good, especially on social media, and they end up sharing a lot of material on social media, hoping to make a difference, but not really thoroughly understanding and investigating and knowing what they really believe in. But then they kind of adopt these things, as Christoph said, as facts. And it makes it really, really difficult to have a conversation because, especially now, if you say anything that's contrary to like the mainstream narrative, you're shut down and like people don't want to hear what you have to say because it's just not conforming. And I mean, this reality on social is reinforced by like people just resharing and reposting and kind of creating this web. So I was wondering if a way to allow for conversation, because clearly now we're so polarized and people have these like beliefs that they know to be facts, is there a way that we could open the possibility to people that facts are not always facts, or like to be open to things that you know contradict the facts that they believe to be true. I mean, science has developed by scientists coming up with theories and then being disproven. So yeah.
All right. Any responses to that? How do we educate our fellow citizens?
I would maybe jump in, if I may, that I see there is also a lack of responsibility from governments on the control of social media, because democracy is literally being eroded by these platforms and governments are just clueless, at least in my view. And second point I wanted to mention, that also these media are deliberately built to decrease the quality of communication. Let's say on Twitter you have this maximum character count on the tweets, so it's
Christoph, are you saying that governments should play a bigger role in like the way that people are communicating online?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying that the case of Cambridge Analytica during Brexit and also during Trump victory. There were these targeted advertisements, and governments were just, they were too late on the train, so to speak. And let's just, let's just look what happened. So no, I'm not saying like do the Chinese model, like intervene in communication, but I think you know what I mean.
No, I think the question is precisely that, right? How do we, just to reflect on what Alliance said as a sociologist, what kind of structures can we create to foster high quality communication? Right? The conclusion is that we think that bad communication is really bad and good communication is really good. And the question is, what circumstances can we create through education, through media design, through whatever, to get people to communicate in good ways?
I have a point here. So I think what's really important in this whole debate about communication, social media, is somehow creating the culture of fact checking and debunking fake news, because well, there is so many opinions and so much content. There's so much content on social media that it's simply overwhelming, and it causes this news fatigue for an individual. So we all know that it's bad to form opinions based on just headlines or small posts or just pictures we see on social media while we're scrolling. But at the same time, it's kind of overwhelming. So I think it's really important to educate people how to check news, if the news is fake or not, or how to see news as opinions and see that it's some facts, but always portrayed from a certain perspective, that it's not like you engage with facts, you engage with perspectives, and usually you engage with your own perspective only. So I think it's, well, there are some organizations that work on this fact-checking culture and teach people how to do that, but it's still very small. So I think this is an important step to take. Just
of course, people who come from liberal arts programs are perhaps used to that and told that. Mm-hmm. But people who are perhaps not university educated or not in university or in different kinds of programs might not be taught that.
Yeah.
So I think
it's kind of some form of elitist knowledge still.
Well, on that topic, I don't know how many of you spoke to people who were perhaps not in liberal arts programs or not in university, but did that make a difference? General question for all of you.
So I can already say that no, in my case not. And I think it's mostly not about being a student or non-student, but about political opinions or some like general identity that a person has. And I think my group was kind of homogeneous. They all had the same views, mostly political views. And I think this is like where you could draw the lines between people.
Okay.
I wanted to comment on the fact-checking perspective, because I think that it is correct to address this issue, but still, as Julia mentioned before, saying that fact-checking is important, people that look at fake news and are overwhelmed by them do not believe in fact-checking. So when you're entering in a spiral of fake news in which the only information you have is blended by a political party or a political idea, you will not believe the opposing view who's saying these facts is not true and this is the reason why it is not true. So when I do not believe personally that fact-checking is the answer, because those addressed by fact-checkers are not willing to understand, not willing to hear how, at least in that perspective, not at least following that pattern of communication. So it's not easy to address people that just believe in one vision of the story, bringing the opposing view and saying that is the correct view, you have to believe it. So that's a key role, that's a key issue to address.
I disagree. I just have a small point to make, because it's not like every person who ever trusted a fake news is a hardcore conspiracy believer. I think like with the amount of information that we encounter, everyone can believe in a fake news occasionally and not even notice that. And I'm not saying about, I'm not talking about debunking concrete fake news. Of course, that's important, but more like about learning people, teaching people the skills to engage with content online. It's more about general skills than concrete fake news, because in that case, you'd have to debunk every single one, and that's a lot of work.
And maybe to add to that, while it would be awesome to have a solution that suits and helps everyone, fact-checking on social media, for example, might not help those who are really deep into one specific narrative or story, but it might still help people that are undecided yet, and show them the complexity of the issues. And it's not simply like a way to go left or right or choose whatever opinion there is, but that there's more to the issues and that there's more complexity. And I think that's something we have to get away from, that we often think, oh, we need a solution for all of the aspects of that problem. And that's also what often happens in climate change discussions, that we say, oh, we can't drive cars anymore. And then everyone in the countryside is like, but that doesn't work for me. But it still would be awesome if people in cities would drive less with their cars. So finding solutions that fit with each other and that are parts of a bigger initiative, I think fact-checking on social media sites could be one building block towards fostering better communication and towards building a common reality to then enable discourse again.
Fiona, you want to jump in here?
Yes. I mean, I actually have, I agree that I think that it really should be about teaching people and like opening people up to exploring things on their own. And the, like, I think that would be the most ideal solution. But I know that like people don't have all the time in the world to go into like reading studies and making sure that the numbers in this article are actually accurate and running the numbers themselves. Like, people don't have time for this. But I really see issue with like promoting fact checking, especially on social media, because fact checkers are funded by, you know, fact checkers get their funding from somewhere, and that means that they have interest, and that means that, you know, they might discredit certain articles that maybe do have some truth to them. And I don't know, I think that it could be really dangerous to start going down this route of like fact checking when like I could see it being detrimental to free speech and like letting people form their own opinions. I think that it's everyone's right to read articles, whether they're correct or incorrect. And I really have issue with social media taking down posts that are factually incorrect. And I also think it's really dangerous to start to call certain articles or certain people who believe these articles conspiracy theorists or things like that, because that just shuts down any sort of possibility for discussion.
I mean, fact-checking doesn't have to mean that people take down articles or that social media takes down articles. So studies have started to show, not completely validated, but started to show that when you have like a warning message on Facebook, like this could be fake news or this could be misleading information, that generally minimizes the engagement with a post. Like, it doesn't mean people don't click it anymore and people don't believe it anymore, but there's a certain step that cautions people and that makes them more cautious towards all the information that are presented and to think for themselves. But I agree with you that we can't expect everyone to read studies all day and to fact check that everything that they read is scientifically correct or so. And that's why I think we need to have a more broader discussion about democracy and who we trust and where we want to delegate power and in which ways we try to.
Maybe that's actually a really nice topic to move on to, which is this question of trust. Who does this generation of students trust? Did that come up in any of your conversations? Who is the who are the people that you do have trust in? question that I always like to ask of students when I'm interviewing them for admissions is, who are your heroes? Who are the heroes of this generation?
I mean, I personally have become quite skeptical of trusting anyone. And I mean, I kind of mentioned this before, but like, I usually look first thing at where the money is coming from. So if someone is speaking out and making statements that might actually like harm their career, or like they have no political or monetary gains from making these statements, then it's something that I will pay attention to. And like, you know, it makes me think like, why are they saying this if it could ruin their career? Maybe they are saying something that I should be paying attention to.
Who else? Don't jump in.
Yeah, I think that I find it hard to trust people that propose simple solutions and that have simple and recurring answers to difficult problems. So I look for the depth of thought and complexity that goes into proposed solutions. And also, I don't trust if people only come up with problems and don't propose anything to fix them and don't have their own thought put into that or just replicate things. So I find it better if I see that there's nuance and open debate about the solutions that are proposed.
To me, if I
go ahead, please.
No, I think that for our generation, it's quite difficult to develop heroes or idols or people to just look up to without any discretion, because nowadays all the people that are renowned all over the world, and if they tend to have absolute positions or definite positions about key issues, they usually encounter a lot of difficulties on a sort of anti-propaganda about them. So it struck me when Greta and her movement hit, because mostly in Italy there was a lot of medias, but not just social media, but just newspapers or even television news that spread fake news about her just to downgrade her personality, to downgrade the movement, and to attack her personally. So I do think that for us, it is quite difficult to develop a hero, somebody to look up to, whatever it is, because with all the information we have, true or not true, it is difficult to discern the people, the real person, so the person with all the problematics it can have, from the character in the scenario. So I think that's really important to understand.
But surely one theme of today's discussion has been that older generations don't always appreciate the concerns of this generation, that existing structures which were designed by previous generations are now limiting current generations, that the problems are not always recognized as problems, and the solutions that we have to offer are not always taken seriously. So who would you know, if we could invite somebody to this conversation, who you feel really needed to hear this, if you could bring your concerns to anybody in the world and had, I don't know, a minute with whoever, who would you want to tell this to? Who would you want to pitch your problem to?
For me, I think that like there's not one individual person who I'd want to address, and I think that like a lot of politicians and people in power, you know, they want to do their best to represent the public, but maybe they won't. I like personally, I would just want to talk to like the people, like the general public. Yeah.
Okay. Because of course that's what this whole project started with. The idea that we want to somehow get these concerns of a generation on the table to, well, make them visible, to make them discussable, and to shove them in the face of current generations. And that also brings us maybe to the final point for today. Do you mind, Samuel, if I go on? Because we now have a number of things. We have a survey that was filled out by 100 people. We have your own contributions. We have the conversations that you've had with your friends and the reports that you wrote about it. And we have a recording of today. And we'll have another recording tomorrow. What should we do with this? How do we take this project forward? What is the next step in this, this trying to make visible the concerns and the hopes and the dreams of this generation?
I think I would just love for it to spark discussion with as many people as possible, because that's what I think where it all starts, and why I was also talking about communication, because it's about talking about the things that are important to us, that move us, and to make them visible. Because most of the time, like, I don't know the issues of my neighbors in the next house, like 10 meters over there. I don't know what moves them, what's important to them, what matters to them. But if this or something like this can spark discussion among people that would normally maybe not engage with each other, I think that can already do something and be a starting point.
So what's the form of communication? How do we communicate this further?
Well, I was gonna also say I think that, like, providing a platform where just regular people, regular students like us can publish like writings and things, because I think it's actually really hard to have work be published and be visible.
I see nodding. I see you see what? Well, Christoph, what's your thinking?
I definitely agree with Fiona. I think it would be great. That's all I wanted to say.
And what is it here?
Excuse me?
What is it here?
The platform for publishing for students, because it's hard to get anything out there, at least I feel like.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to engage this kind of conversation in universities, because usually university looks at a free and safe place to bring up those issues, to discuss the issues that can be controversial. So maybe even if each of us could bring this conversation up in our universities in some way, and it's also will raise awareness and more people can learn about it.
Can I add something?
Please.
I have been a publisher of 25 years, but the key thing is who is reading it, how many people are reading it, how many people are engaged, because there's lots of tons of publications, and no one reads them except those who wrote them usually. So this is very important aspect. Even if there's no problem to create a platform, but we, for example, send the note to your schools that you were the winners, and we got a very positive feedback from the leadership of your school that they are very proud of you, and then we communicate with them. So if we start any platform, it is important that you are engaged in helping distributing these messages and discussions, because otherwise it's kind of a closed bubble of a few people discussing things. And I hope that you all come to tomorrow, because there is a question the post that during the discussion, how did the answers of non-students differ from the students' ones? Do the non-students consider students' problems elitist or not at all? We discussed that before our discussion, but I think I'm sure there was some difference, and And this would be also a very important issue with respect to communication and discussion, that how to reach and outreach to people who are not students. And you mentioned that there wasn't much difference, but I'm sure if you dig deep enough, there must be a difference, because these are the different worlds often people live in. And so consider that you had to scratch deeper with non-students, and then you discover the differences, and that could be a part of a project perhaps. But that's just only suggestion. Tune, I'll leave it.
No, absolutely, because I think that is indeed the question, right? A platform is lovely, but there are many platforms. A publication could be an interesting format. We at some point we talked about this idea of getting people from a further generation, politicians, thought leaders, philosophers, historians, whatever, to engage in a conversation with this generation about these issues. Yeah, you can do many different things, and we're just trying to figure out what gets people excited.
I think you cannot talk about all these issues at once. And when we're talking about what we should do with these issues and with discussion, I think it would be useful to talk about each of the concerns in isolation, and then make connections with people who are already working towards these issues. For example, with people who are working on climate change in the EU, or on migration in the EU, or on changing the education system. That seems to be a big theme here. So I think connecting us or other young people to people who are working on these issues already, but on a more societal level, and seeing them as specialists. I don't think that all these issues can be addressed at once. And I also had a point to make about the division between students and non-students. So I think that also depends on which issue is talked about, because if we're talking about the job market, probably students and non-students will have very different perspectives. Or if we're talking about housing market or and so on. But if we're talking about climate change or migration, then the views can be very similar or very different, but that doesn't stem from being a student or non-student, but from your own beliefs, I guess.
And that's, of course, the political differences that you've also talked about.
Yeah.
If I may jump in right now to address this conclusion, I think also that it is important that we talk with non-students, and not only because they have a different perspective, but the sooner we address young people, the better it is, because they get used to communicating, they get used to sharing and to have discussions with their peers. So I do think that in university, we are more used to it, and a lot of people, as the other guys right here show me, are already prepared to have discussions upon future issues. But the sooner we address younger people, high school students, that is when we can not change generation, but prepare them to be more willing to share their opinions in the future.
I think Vico makes a really interesting point there, and something which occurred to me when we talk about fact checking. I was reading recently that in Finland, for example, they have introduced fact checking and how to evaluate information in the second grade. Right? They're not waiting to university to get people engaged in this. And I think Vico, you really hit on something there, that we talk a lot about university education, but in some of these issues, maybe university education is too late, right? That we need to start cultivating some of these skills and developing those skills much earlier, much earlier.
On that topic, final question before we break up, because we've been going for a while. Was this fun for you? I mean, we provided a little bit of an incentive with the money, but thinking about the questions in the survey, having conversations, writing and synthesizing all that.
On my part, yes, I think I've had a very interesting discussion with my friends or peers, other young people, and I think it wasn't just one conversation, but that it kind of trickled down to many small conversations that I have with them outside of this official interview. So I think it was fun, and it will be fun in the upcoming conversations I'll have with them.
Okay. Christoph, was it fun for you? As a final thought?
Oh yes, definitely. And it also like we engaged in a conversation that we normally wouldn't. So that was also an added benefit. And I also got in touch with some old friends. So
always a good excuse, always a good thing. All right. Vigo, what was it like for you? Did you enjoy it?
Well, it was really interesting, and also I tried to have different guests which I knew had divergent opinions and did not know each other. So the discussion sometimes was quite funny to observe, because I noticed some people that were same age, maybe similar background, but had totally divergent opinions on some key issues. So that was maybe the most interesting part.
Mm-hmm. Alyosha, what was the most exciting thing for you?
Well, it opened up a room for us first-year students who just know each other digitally to have a conversation about things that were outside of the realm of what we study together and when we meet in seminars online. So that was really nice. And it also, some conversations came back to me that it sparked along the way, where people are like, oh, I have this to contribute. I heard you're doing this and I couldn't attend the meeting. So this is what really is challenging to me, or what I see as something important. So yeah, it was really fun.
Veronica?
Yeah, for example, for me, after like a main conversation, I had a lot of small chats with the people. And one of the issue which I didn't address in the report in here, but Fiona mentioned in the beginning about EU passport, European citizen passport, and how it can cut you from all the opportunities you could have as a young person. So like I think there's more and more issues to discover for me personally. So I think I will have more and more conversation with the people about these topics, and this was a lot of fun, and I think I will devote myself more to this in the future.
Fiona?
I think it really opened my eyes, like that I am kind of privileged to have media and misinformation being one of my like main concerns, especially after talking to a lot of students at my school who are not from the EU, and like every day every day of their life these problems of like not having a certain passport or being judged by how they appear, like they have to face these every day, and I'm really grateful that I was able to hear their perspectives. Yeah.
Lola, you haven't said much, but you've observed.
Yeah, I know. Well, because I was very surprised, because I thought at the beginning that the answers I gave in the application essays, I thought that I had very fixed opinions. So I wasn't sure that if I include them in the discussion, if it will be very narrow. But I realized also in this discussion, that's why I kind of was more in an observing mode, that there are so different angles that really changed my opinion, because sometimes it just fascinates me to see that there's a lot of room, and that I don't know anything about things that I thought I was certain about. And for me, what was fun in the discussion is that I contacted a lot of old friends whom I haven't seen in a while, and I saw how their lives really changed their views. So sometimes I contacted friends with whom I was very close when I was younger. And then suddenly they talk about their university environment and about people who changed their mind and new people they met. And that was very interesting and very fun to see. And I also contacted people I didn't know at all, just people I saw were very active in a certain field. And then suddenly getting in touch with them and actually talking to them and asking them about specific topics, that was very interesting. Yeah, and I'm looking
forward to hearing what you came up with tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I hope, and I really look forward to continuing this conversation tomorrow when we hear from the other winners. And it really would be lovely for you to join in as well, because then we can get more input for, well, how we look back on this phase of the project and where we want to take it next. So with that, stay safe, stay stimulated, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Same link at 4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.